The GPS died the moment I crossed into Ashfield. Fog rolled in like it knew me.
I didn't want to be afraid yet. I hadn't planned on coming back to Ashfield. No one ever plans to return to a town like this. You don't circle it on a map or talk about it at parties. Ashfield is the kind of town people leave quietly and never look back at. At least that's what they tell themselves. But here I was. The road narrowed as soon as I crossed the county line. The GPS on my dashboard blinked once, then went dark, as if it had decided I didn't need directions anymore. I slowed down, my tires crunching over gravel that hadn't been replaced in decades. The air felt different here, thicker, heavier, like breathing through damp cloth. The sign welcoming me back stood crooked on rusted poles. Welcome to Ashfield, population 1,143. Someone had scratched something beneath it, not words, just long, deep grooves as if carved by fingernails or something pretending to be. I swallowed and kept driving. Ashfield wasn't supposed to exist anymore. At least that's what I'd heard. Factory closures, a fire at the old paper mill, families leaving one by one. When my mother died, the lawyer handling her estate told me the house was still standing, still legally mine. He sounded confused about it, like the paperwork itself shouldn't have been there. I told myself this was just business. Clean out the house, sell the land, leave. That lie lasted about 3 minutes. Fog began to roll in as the road curved toward town. It wasn't normal fog, too low, too deliberate. It crawled along the asphalt like it knew where it was going. My headlights cut through it in thin, trembling beams. And then I saw the buildings. Ashfield looked preserved, not abandoned, not decayed, just old. Storefronts lined the main street, their windows dark but intact. A diner with chrome trim dulled by time. A gas station with prices still posted on a cracked sign, numbers so outdated they felt like a joke. No cars moved, no people walked the sidewalks, but the town didn't feel empty. I parked in front of what used to be Miller's Grocery. The engine ticked as it cooled, the sound too loud in the silence. When I stepped out, the smell hit me immediately. Wet wood, old paper, something faintly metallic. The silence wasn't natural. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a rural town. It was expectant, like a held breath. I shut my car door, and the sound echoed down the street longer than it should have. Get it together, I muttered to myself. My voice sounded wrong here, smaller. I started walking, boots tapping against the sidewalk. With each step, memories stirred, unwanted, uninvited. The way the town bell used to ring at noon, the laughter that never quite reached people's eyes, the feeling of being watched even when I was alone. I hadn't been back since I was 17. That was the year everything went wrong. I reached the town square, where a dry fountain sat cracked and empty. A statue stood at its center, a man carved from stone, hands folded, eyes lowered. I remembered him vaguely. No plaque, no name, just the founder, they used to say. I couldn't remember ever seeing his face clearly. As I passed, I felt it again, that subtle pressure at the back of my neck, the instinct to turn around. I didn't. That was my first mistake. The house sat at the edge of town, just past the tree line. My childhood home. 2 stories, white paint peeling, porch sagging but still standing. One window upstairs glowed faintly.
I stopped dead. There shouldn't have been any lights. I stood there for a long time, staring, my heart thudding slow and heavy. Finally, I told myself it was a reflection, a trick of the fog, anything but the truth. The front door opened easily. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and something older. The house smelled exactly the same. That alone made my stomach twist. No place should smell unchanged after 20 years. I stepped inside and froze. Footprints marked the dust on the floor. Fresh ones. They led down the hallway toward the living room, adult-sized, barefoot. "Hello?" I called. My voice echoed back to me, warped and distant. The living room was untouched, furniture draped in sheets, family photos still on the walls. My father's old armchair sat where he'd left it, facing the window like he was still waiting for something. I pulled the sheet off the couch, sending dust into the air. The particles hung there longer than they should have, shimmering faintly. I told myself to move fast, get boxes, get out. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Upstairs. Slow. Measured. Like whoever or whatever was walking didn't need the rush. "Mom?" I whispered, even though I knew better. The footsteps stopped. Then came a voice. My voice. Calling my name from the second floor. Not distorted, not monstrous. Perfect. I backed away, heart hammering hard it hurt. "That's not funny," I said, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to. Silence. Then laughter. Soft, familiar. I bolted for the door and slammed into it. The handle wouldn't turn. I twisted, yanked, slammed my shoulder into the wood. The door didn't budge. Panic crawled up my spine. Behind me, the footsteps resumed. Closer now. I spun around, breathing hard, fists clenched. The hallway was empty, but the house felt different, tighter, smaller, like the walls had leaned in while I wasn't looking. The voice came again, right behind my ear. "You came back." I screamed. The lights flickered, and then everything went dark.
When the lights came back on, I was lying on the living room floor. For a few seconds, I didn't know where I was. My cheek pressed against cold wood, my tongue tasted copper, and my ears rang like I'd been dropped underwater. I pushed myself up slowly, every muscle screaming in protest. The house was lit. Not brightly, just enough. Lamps glowed with a weak yellow hue, shadows pooling thick in the corners. I knew, with a certainty that made my stomach drop, that none of these lights had been on before. I staggered to my feet. Okay. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. I've learned that fear feeds on acknowledgement. Or maybe that's just what I tell myself. The front door stood closed behind me. Unlocked. I turned the handle. It opened easily. The fog outside had thickened, swallowing the porch, the yard, the road. Ashfield was gone beyond a curtain of white. Leaving now felt wrong, like stepping off a cliff you couldn't see the bottom of. I stayed inside. That was my second mistake. The house creaked as I moved, every sound exaggerated. Floorboards complained beneath my weight, groaning like they were waking up after a long sleep. I noticed then, truly noticed, that the house had a rhythm. a soft, uneven thump. At first, I thought it was my own heartbeat echoing in my ears, but it wasn't. The sound came from the walls. I pressed my palm against the wallpaper. It was warm, too warm. Beneath it, I felt a faint vibration, subtle but undeniable. The house was breathing. I pulled my hand back like I'd been burned. "No," I said aloud. "No, no, no!" The hallway stretched longer than I remembered. Doors lined both sides, bedroom, bathroom, storage, all closed. I didn't remember closing them. At the end of the hall stood the staircase, rising into darkness. I hadn't been upstairs yet. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run, to get in the car and drive until the town disappeared in the rearview mirror. But the house had already said my name, and some deep, buried part of me, the part that never really left Ashfield, wanted answers. I climbed the stairs. Each step creaked louder than the last, as if protesting my ascent. Halfway up, I felt it again, that pressure, that sensation of being watched from all sides, not from above, not from behind, from within. The second-floor hallway was longer than the one below. The walls were lined with photographs. That wasn't right. We never hung photos up here. I approached slowly. They were pictures of me. Not posed, not smiling for the camera. These were stolen moments. Me sitting alone in my childhood bedroom, staring at the floor. Me standing in the backyard at night, looking toward the tree line. Me crying on the stairs after my father died. Photos I didn't know existed. Photos taken when I was alone. "Who did this?" I whispered. The photos extended down the hall, growing more recent. Me at 16, 17, and then me now. One photograph showed me standing in the living room, staring at the front door. Taken minutes ago. I tore it from the wall. The paper felt warm, damp. Behind it, carved directly into the wall, was a sentence: "You never really left." My chest tightened. "I left," I said. "I left this place." The hallway lights flickered. A door at the far end creaked open. My old bedroom. I hadn't slept there in 20 years. I approached it slowly, each step heavier than the last. The smell hit me before I crossed the threshold. Dust, old fabric, and something sharp like ozone. The room was perfectly preserved. Posters on the wall, my desk, my bed, and sitting on the edge of that bed, me, or something wearing my face. He looked younger, 17 maybe, hair longer, eyes hollowed out by sleepless nights. He stared at the floor, hands clasped tightly together. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He stood up. "I waited," he said. His voice was mine, but stripped of warmth, flattened, empty. "You're not real," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "You always say that." The room darkened around us, shadows creeping inward. I felt dizzy, like the air had grown too thin. "What do you want?" I asked. He stood slowly. "For you to remember." The walls began to bleed. Not blood, not exactly. A dark, viscous substance seeped from the cracks, sliding downward, pulsing in time with the house's breathing. The smell intensified, metallic and rotten. "I remember everything," I said. He shook his head. "No, you remember what lets you sleep." He stepped closer. Images flooded my mind, memories I'd buried so deep I convinced myself they weren't real. The town meetings, the sermons about sacrifice, the nights when people disappeared and no one asked questions. And the fire. I didn't... You lit the match, he said quietly. The room shook violently. The lights burst, plunging us into darkness. I felt hands on my shoulders, too many hands, cold and insistent. Voices filled the room, not shouting, whispering. Dozens of them, hundreds, all saying my name. I screamed and shoved forward blindly, crashing through the doorway and tumbling down the stairs. I landed hard at the bottom, pain exploding through my side. The whispers stopped. The house went still. I lay there gasping, tears streaming down my face, my mind racing. I had forgotten. God help me, I had forgotten. Outside, somewhere deep in the fog, a bell began to ring. Slow, deliberate, calling the town to wake up.
The bell didn't stop. It rang with the steady patience of something eternal, echoing through the fog, vibrating in my bones. Each toll pressed against my chest, squeezing air from my lungs. I lay there on the floor for a long time, listening, counting the seconds between rings. 7 seconds apart. Always 7. I knew that rhythm. I'd known it once before. I dragged myself upright, my body trembling. The house had gone quiet again, too quiet. No breathing, no whispers, just the bell, ringing somewhere beyond the walls, calling people who still knew how to answer. I checked my phone. No signal, no time, just a black screen that reflected my face back at me, pale and older than I felt. I needed to leave. I wanted to leave. But the bell wasn't calling me out of Ashfield. It was calling me back into it. I stepped onto the porch. The fog parted slightly, just enough to reveal the road leading toward the town square. Lights glowed faintly in the distance, warm, inviting. Wrong. As I walked, memories crept in with every step. Not full recollections, more like impressions, feelings without context, the sense of standing shoulder to shoulder with others, the smell of smoke, the weight of shared silence pressed down by shared understanding. Ashfield believed in unity. That was the word they used. The town square emerged from the fog like a stage set for a play that never ended. The fountain stood dry and cracked. The statue of the founder loomed over everything, his stone eyes cast downward in quiet judgment. People stood around it, at least 24 of them. Men, women, children, all facing the statue, all silent. They looked normal, too normal. Their clothes were clean but outdated, their faces calm, serene, like churchgoers waiting for a sermon to begin. None of them acknowledged me as I approached. The bell stopped ringing. A man stepped forward. I recognized him instantly. Sheriff Callahan. He hadn't aged, not really. His hair was still dark, his uniform crisp, his badge gleamed faintly under the square's flickering lights. He smiled at me. "Evening," he said. "Took you long enough." My throat tightened. "You're dead," he chuckled softly. "That's a matter of perspective." The others turned then, every face swiveling toward me in unison, their eyes locked on mine, and I felt that pressure again, that terrible, intimate awareness of being seen through. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "None of this should still be happening." Sheriff Callahan nodded, and yet here we are, together again. The crowd parted, revealing something in the center of the square. A wooden structure, blackened, charred. The platform. I remembered now, fully. Ashfield had been dying long before the fire. The mill closing was just the excuse. Crops failed, businesses shuttered. People whispered about curses, about the town being forgotten by God. Then someone found the old records, the founders' journals. They spoke of bargains, of offerings, of a promise made when Ashfield was nothing more than dirt and trees, a promise that prosperity could be sustained as long as the town gave something in return. Not something, someone. At first it was animals, livestock, pets. It wasn't enough. Then came the meetings, closed-door discussions held after church, voices hushed but urgent. Everyone knew what was being discussed, but no one said it out loud, until the bell rang. The first time it was a stranger, a drifter passing through. No one missed him. The town flourished for a while after that. Then the bell rang again. This time it was someone local, a man with no family, a woman who lived alone, and still the town demanded more. I remembered standing in the crowd, my hand shaking, my heart racing, not with fear, but with something worse. Relief. Because it wasn't me, because it wasn't my family, because as long as someone else was chosen, I was safe. "You helped," Sheriff Callahan said gently, stepping closer. "I was a kid," I whispered. "I didn't understand." "You understood enough," he replied. The crowd began to murmur, soft voices overlapping, forming a low hum that vibrated through the square. "The fire," I said. "That wasn't part of it." "No," the sheriff agreed. "That was panic. People tried to run, tried to burn the old ways away." My chest tightened. I remembered the flames, the screams, the way the smoke choked the sky. "And you ran too," he continued, "left us to clean up the mess." The statue's eyes seemed to lift. The shadows around the square deepened. "The town survived," he said. "Barely, but it did. Because some of us stayed, because the promise was never broken." A woman stepped forward from the crowd. My mother. She looked just as she had the last time I'd seen her. Tired, eyes sunken, mouth set in a tight line. She didn't smile. "Why did you come back?" she asked. Tears blurred my vision. I didn't know. She shook her head slowly. "You always know." The ground beneath us trembled. The platform creaked, fresh scorch marks appearing along its edges as if the fire were replaying itself. The bell began to ring again, 7 seconds apart. I looked at the faces around me, familiar, expectant, hungry, and I realized the worst truth of all. Ashfield didn't just remember me, it had been waiting. I don't remember climbing onto the platform. I remember standing at its edge, my legs shaking so badly I thought they might give out. And then suddenly I was there, on the blackened boards, the smell of old smoke and something far worse rising around me. The crowd pressed in close, forming a perfect circle. No gaps, no exits. The bell stopped ringing. The silence that followed was unbearable. I looked down at the platform and saw grooves carved into the wood, deep ones, hundreds of them, overlapping as if generations of hands had clawed at the same surface in the same places. Names were etched there too, worn smooth by time. Some I recognized, some I didn't. One name stood out above the rest. My own. I staggered back, nearly losing my balance. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible." Sheriff Callahan stepped up beside the platform, his boots making no sound against the stone. "You were always meant to come back," he said. "The town doesn't forget its caretakers." "I was never chosen. I wasn't on the list." He smiled sadly. "You wrote the lists." The crowd began to hum again, low, rhythmic. The sound wrapped around my skull, vibrating behind my eyes. It felt ancient, ritualistic, familiar in the worst way. "You don't have to do this," I said, turning to the faces nearest me. "You know what this is. You know it doesn't end." My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. A man near the front, Mr. Hargreave, my old math teacher, tilted his head. "It ends for us," he said calmly. Something shifted beneath the platform. The wood flexed. I felt it through the soles of my shoes, a slow, deliberate movement, like something massive turning in its sleep. A pressure rose from below, forcing the breath from my lungs. "What is it?" I gasped. Sheriff Callahan looked toward the statue. "You never wanted to know," he said. "You just wanted it fed." The statue began to crack. Stone split along invisible seams, dust falling in slow streams. The eyes, those featureless stone hollows, darkened, filling with something that reflected light. Not eyes, depth. The humming rose in pitch, becoming a chant, words threaded through it now, too old for me to understand, but heavy with intent. The air grew thick, pressing against my skin, my chest, my thoughts. The platform lurched. A seam opened in its center, wood splitting apart with a wet, tearing sound. Heat rushed up from below, carrying the smell of ash, rot, and iron. I backed away, slipping, my hands scraping against the carved names. "You can't refuse," Sheriff Callahan said, his voice almost kind. "The chosen never do. Even the ones who scream eventually understand." I screamed anyway. The crowd didn't react. The opening beneath me widened, revealing darkness, not empty darkness, but layered darkness, like looking into the throat of something alive. Shapes shifted inside it, slow and deliberate. I saw faces, hundreds of them, men, women, children, all pressed together, mouths open, eyes hollow, their expressions frozen in the moment of realization. Some were fresh, others were ancient, worn down to vague impressions. All of them were part of Ashfield now. Hands reached up from the dark, not grabbing, inviting. I fell to my knees, sobbing. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know what it would become." The hands paused. The chanting faltered. The thing beneath the platform moved closer to the opening, and for the first time, I felt its attention fully settle on me. It wasn't hunger, not exactly. It was ownership. "You kept us fed," a voice said, not aloud, but inside my skull. "You kept the promise." I was a coward. I let it happen. "You belong." The crowd gasped as one. The fog surged inward, spiraling around the platform, forming towering shapes that loomed over us. The statue finally shattered, stone collapsing inward, revealing a hollow cavity filled with darkness deeper than night. I understood then. The statue hadn't represented the founder. It had been a lid. "You don't need me," I said desperately. "The town is still here. You're still fed." The voice pulsed with amusement. "The town is dying again." A scream cut through the air.
I turned just in time to see a teenage boy dragged forward by unseen hands, his heels scraping against the stone. His face was streaked with tears, his mouth open in a silent plea. My stomach dropped. "No," I said. "Take me. Don't take him." The sheriff looked at me sharply. The voice paused. "You would trade?" "Yes," I said, without hesitation. "That's what you want. Balance. Payment." The crowd murmured, uncertainty rippling through them for the first time. The boy was released. He collapsed to the ground, sobbing. The opening beneath the platform widened again. "Step forward," the voice said. I rose slowly, my legs weak but steadying as resolve settled over me like a shroud. I took one step toward the darkness, then another. I stopped at the edge. And when this isn't enough, when the town asks again... The voice did not answer. That was answer enough. Behind me, the crowd watched in silence, some with relief, some with regret, none with surprise. I closed my eyes and stepped forward. The darkness swallowed me whole.
Falling wasn't what I expected. There was no rush of air, no sense of speed. One moment I was standing on the edge of the platform. The next I was suspended, held, cradled in a darkness that felt thick and deliberate. It pressed against my skin like warm mud, slowing every movement, every thought. I tried to scream. The sound never left my mouth. The darkness seeped into me, filling my lungs without suffocating me, coating my eyes without blinding me. I could still see, but not with sight. I knew where I was instead, in the same way you know someone is standing behind you without turning around. I was inside Ashfield, not beneath it, not under it, inside. The town unfolded around me, not as streets and buildings, but as memories layered over one another, stacked so tightly they blurred together. I saw the mill running at full capacity, smoke billowing proudly into a clean blue sky. I saw children laughing in the square, barefoot and sunburned. I saw funerals held without grief, because grief had been rationed, parceled out carefully. Then I saw the sacrifices, every single one. They didn't come as images, they came as feelings. Fear sharp and metallic, hope thin and desperate, acceptance heavy as wet cloth. I felt each one pass through me, felt the moment they were taken, the moment they were absorbed. This wasn't a pit, it was a stomach, and I was being digested. "Do not resist," the voice said, not as command, but as instruction. Resistance causes pain. I deserve pain, I said, or thought. It was hard to tell anymore. I let it happen. The darkness rippled around me, amused. You were useful. Useful things are not discarded. Something brushed against my leg. I flinched. A shape emerged from the dark, humanoid, but wrong. Its edges were soft, unfinished, as if it were still being sculpted. Its face shifted constantly, cycling through dozens of expressions, dozens of people.
I recognized some of them. They drifted closer, surrounding me, not threatening, not comforting, observing. "What happens to them?" I asked. "The ones you take?" The darkness pulsed. "They stay." The shapes pressed in closer, and suddenly I understood. They weren't prisoners, they were components. Ashfield wasn't built on land, it was built on people. Each sacrifice reinforced the town, stitched cracks in its foundation, propped up its failing structures. Every house, every streetlight, every smiling face above ground was supported by what lay below. "You're lying," I said weakly. The darkness shifted again and showed me the truth. I saw myself years ago, sitting in those meetings, nodding along as names were discussed in hushed tones. I saw how the town responded afterwards, crops improving, businesses reopening, hope returning like a controlled burn. I saw how good it felt, not joy, relief, the worst emotion of all. "You don't give back," I said weakly. "You just delay the end." "All ends are delayed," the voice replied. "That is what makes them bearable." Something wrapped around my wrist, a hand, solid, cold. I looked down and saw a woman staring up at me. Her eyes were clear, aware. "She shouldn't be here," she said softly. "Neither should you," I replied. She smiled sadly. "We all say that." More faces emerged, some whispering, some silent, some screaming without sound. I felt them pressing into me, merging memories, emotions, guilt flooding through my veins. I was becoming part of the structure. "No," I said. "You said I was useful. Then use me." The darkness paused. "Clarify." "Let me remember," I said. "Let me stay me, not dissolved, not erased." Silence stretched. Then, "Remembrance is pain." "Good," I said. "Then I won't forget again." The darkness tightened around me, squeezing, testing. "You would be a watcher, a weight, a scar." "I already am," I said. For the first time, the darkness hesitated. "Very well." The pressure eased slightly, not gone, but redirected. The shapes around me withdrew, fading back into the mass. I felt something lock into place inside me, like a brand pressed into my soul. "You will stay aware." The town surged above me. I felt every footstep, every breath taken on Ashfield's streets. I felt the boy I'd saved clinging to his mother, sobbing in relief. I felt the sheriff's calm satisfaction. I felt the town settle, stabilized, for now. And I felt something else. Hunger. Not mine, the town's. It never stopped. It just waited. The darkness began to lift me, not upward, not outward, but elsewhere. I felt myself being reshaped, stretched thin, anchored between worlds. "You will speak when called. You will warn. You will lie. You will lure." "I won't," I said, though my voice felt distant. "You already are." Light burst through the dark. I screamed and woke up. I was lying in the back seat of my car, Morning light filtered through the fog, thinner now, retreating. My clothes were soaked with sweat, my throat burned, my hands shook uncontrollably. The town square was empty. The platform was gone. The statue stood whole again. The sign at the edge of town read, "Welcome to Ashfield, population 1,144. I drove. I didn't look back, but even now, years later, I still feel it, that pull in my chest, that awareness of footsteps I can't hear, bells that don't ring. Ashfield is still there, and sometimes when I close my eyes, I can feel it breathing.
I didn't go home after Ashfield. I didn't trust myself to be alone with silence, not the kind of silence that lets thoughts wander back to places they shouldn't. I drove until the sun was high and the fog was nothing more than a bad memory clinging to the edges of fields and tree lines. I stopped at a motel off the interstate, the kind with flickering vacancy signs and carpets that smelled faintly of bleach and regret. It didn't matter where I slept. Ashfield came with me. That first night, I dreamed of bells, not ringing, breathing, expanding and contracting like lungs made of bronze. Each inhale pulled something out of me, memories, emotions, pieces of myself I hadn't realized were still mine. Each exhale pushed something back in, heavy, sour, unfamiliar. I woke up screaming. The man in the next room pounded on the wall and told me to shut up. I apologized. That became a pattern. Days passed, weeks. I tried to convince myself the town was behind me. I told myself the population sign had been a hallucination, that trauma does strange things to perception. Then I noticed the cracks. It started small. I'd be driving through some nowhere town, gas station, diner, single blinking traffic light, and feel that familiar pressure at the back of my neck, the sensation of being noticed, watched. I'd look around and see people standing just a little too still, smiling just a little too late, listening. I learned to leave quickly. Ashfield had said I would speak when called. I didn't believe it. I was wrong. The first time it happened, I was in Iowa. A bartender mentioned an abandoned town nearby, half joking, half intrigued. Creepy place. Nobody stays long. My mouth opened before I could stop it. You should check it out, I heard myself say. Places like that, they remember things. The bartender laughed. I didn't. That night, the bell rang in my dreams again. The hunger felt closer, stronger. I started to understand. Ashfield didn't need people to return willingly. It needed stories. Every time someone heard about it, every time curiosity took root, it grew a little stronger. And now, through me, it could reach farther than it ever had before. I tried to warn people instead, tried to tell them the truth. They never listened. Fear only sharpened their interest. The more I insisted they stay away, the more fascinated they became. Ashfield twisted every warning into an invitation. "You're helping us," the voice whispered one night as I lay awake in a cheap motel bed staring at the ceiling. "I'm trying to stop you," I whispered back. "Intent is irrelevant. Outcome is all that matters." I stopped sleeping after that. I started documenting everything. Names, places, dates, towns that felt wrong, towns that echoed. I noticed patterns, similar layouts, similar founding dates, similar disappearances. Ashfield wasn't unique. It was a template. Some towns failed quickly, burned out, collapsed. Others adapted, fed. I wasn't the only one who had escaped.
I found others like me eventually. Drifters, addicts, conspiracy theorists, people with haunted eyes and fragmented stories. We recognized each other instantly. Survivors. None of us stayed together long. Being close made the hunger worse. One man told me he could hear footsteps beneath every sidewalk. A woman swore her reflection blinked independently sometimes, mouthing words she couldn't hear. We were all still connected. Anchors. One night I felt it clearly, Ashfield pulling on me hard enough to make my vision blur. I collapsed to my knees in a grocery store aisle, clutching my chest as that familiar pressure tightened. Somewhere, a bell was ringing. I knew what that meant. Someone else had refused. Someone else had tried to run, and Ashfield needed help convincing them otherwise. I screamed into the fluorescent-lit air, drawing stares from strangers who didn't understand why I was crying. "Not this time," I said aloud. "Find another way." The pressure intensified. Images flooded my mind. Roads winding into fog, signs welcoming travelers, houses with lights left on upstairs. I saw myself standing at the edge of a town I'd never visited before, smiling, telling someone it was safe. I blacked out. When I came to, I was on the road, driving. The sign ahead read, "Welcome to Tomorrow's End. Population unreadable." I slammed the brakes, skidding to a stop just short of the sign. My hands shook violently. "No," I whispered. The bell rang once. Inside my chest, something shifted. I realized then that Ashfield didn't need my cooperation. It had rewritten me. I could resist, but resistance had a cost. Each time I fought it, it took something else instead. Sleep, memory, control. Eventually, there would be nothing left to resist with. I turned the car around. The bell stopped. For now. But I know the truth. The towns are spreading, and people like me, we're the roots.
We tried. We failed. We thought we could kill it. That was our mistake. There were 5 of us at first, people who had escaped towns like Ashfield and lived long enough to understand what they were. We found each other through half-buried forums, comment sections that vanished overnight, handwritten notes left in the margins of library books no one checked out anymore. We never used real names. Names mattered to the towns. We met in places that felt empty, not abandoned, but unclaimed. Truck stops at 3 a.m, churches that had lost their congregations. One time, a burned-out school where the blackboard still listed homework from decades ago. We compared scars, not physical ones. Gaps in memory, missing time, nightmares that felt shared. All of us had heard the bell. All of us had been asked to help. One of us hadn't refused. We never spoke about him. The plan was simple. Too simple, really. Find one of the towns before it could stabilize, before it could feed properly. Destroy the center. Burn the platform. Shatter the statue. Break the ritual and starve the thing beneath. We chose a place called Greyhook. Population signs had been removed entirely. Greyhook sat low in a valley, fog pooling there like water in a bowl. Even during the day, sunlight struggled to reach the streets. The buildings leaned inward as if conferring quietly. We arrived at dusk. The bell rang as soon as we crossed the town line. One of us, Anna, nearly turned back right then. Her hands shook so badly she dropped her backpack. "It knows. It always knows." "We're ready," Marcus said. "This time." We weren't. The town greeted us like old friends. Doors unlocked themselves. Streetlights flickered on as we passed. We saw people watching from windows, faces expressionless,
but attentive, not hostile, hopeful. The square was smaller than Ashfield's, but the layout was identical. Fountain, statue, platform. That should have warned us. We moved fast, doused the platform with gasoline, packed explosives beneath the statue. No speeches, no hesitation. I lit the match. For one beautiful moment, the fire took. Flames roared upward, black smoke spiraling into the sky. The wood cracked and split, embers raining down like sparks from a dying star. The town screamed. Not the people, the buildings. Glass shattered, walls groaned, the ground shook beneath our feet. The statue split open, not crumbling like Ashfield's, but unfolding. Inside was flesh, gray, wet, pulsing. The fire fed it. Hands burst from the platform, dragging the flames downward, consuming them. The fire dimmed, then vanished, swallowed whole. The bell rang wildly now, no rhythm, no restraint. People poured into the square. They weren't calm anymore. They were furious. "You're killing it," someone screamed. "You're killing us!" Marcus tried to reason with them. "This isn't salvation, it's a parasite." A man tackled him from behind. Anna was dragged screaming toward the platform. I ran. I didn't mean to, but the moment I saw the hands reach for me, I ran like I always had. Behind me, Greyhook closed. Streets shifted, alleys lengthened, buildings rearranged themselves, guiding me not out, but in. I could feel the town's desperation, its terror at the thought of starvation. The hunger was panicking. I burst out of the fog onto the highway, lungs burning, legs shaking. The bell stopped. Greyhook stabilized. 2 days later, news reports called it a tragic gas explosion. 3 missing persons, no suspects. The town thrived afterwards. I felt it. That's how I knew we'd failed. You can't burn hunger. You can't starve something that feeds on fear, guilt, and hope. And every time someone tries to destroy it, the towns learn. They adapt. They grow smarter, stronger, more subtle. Ashfield doesn't need the bell anymore. It has us.
I stopped running after Greyhook, not because I felt safe, but because I finally understood that distance meant nothing. You can't outrun something that lives in memory, in curiosity, in the quiet space where people lean closer when they hear the word secret. The towns don't chase you. They wait. I tried silence next. I cut myself off from the world. No late-night conversations, no warnings whispered over cheap coffee. I stayed in places that changed too fast for roots to form, cities where buildings were torn down and replaced before anything could settle in. For a while, it worked. Then, the dreams changed. I stopped dreaming of bells and platforms and fog. Instead, I dreamed of people listening, sitting alone in dark rooms, headphones on, eyes closed, breathing slowing as my voice filled their ears. My voice. I'd never told anyone my story out loud, and yet, there it was, being told. I woke up one night with my throat raw, my jaw aching like I'd been speaking for hours. On the motel nightstand beside me lay a notebook I didn't remember buying. It was open, filled. Page after page, written in my handwriting, was my story. Ashfield, the bell, the hunger, all of it.
Not summarized, not distorted. Perfect. At the bottom of the last page was a sentence I hadn't written. Every telling is a gift. I burned the notebook in the sink. The smoke smelled like old paper and wet earth. That same night, somewhere far away, a bell rang once. I felt it like a tug behind my ribs. The next morning, I saw my story online. Different words, same bones. A creepypasta forum, a podcast script, a YouTube narration with 1 million views, and a comment section full of fascination and dread. This would make an amazing series. I want to visit a town like this. Stories like this make me feel alive. Each comment landed like a nail driven into something soft. The towns were learning a new way to feed. They didn't need blood. They didn't need fire. They needed attention. Fear focused long enough to take shape. I started to hear the bell while I was awake, not loud, just beneath everything else, beneath traffic, beneath conversations, beneath my own thoughts. Every time someone listened, every time someone imagined the town, the hunger grew. "You turned me into a storyteller," I said one night, staring at my reflection in a dark window. "That's what this is." The glass rippled. "We turned you into a door," the voice replied. I saw it then, the pattern I'd missed before. Every town like Ashfield had a story attached to it, local legends, whispers, warnings that sounded like invitations. People didn't stumble into these places by accident. They were led by stories passed hand to hand, mouth to mouth, screen to screen. And I was becoming one of the loudest. I tried to stop it by telling the ending. I told people the cost, the aftermath, the way survival rots into servitude. I stripped the mystery away, laid everything bare. It didn't matter. They listened harder, because hope doesn't need mystery. It just needs the possibility that someone else might survive. The bell rang constantly now, not 7 seconds apart. No rhythm at all. I felt towns waking up, not forming, remembering. Places that had almost died decades ago suddenly thriving. Streets repaved, schools reopened, people returning without knowing why. Somewhere, a platform was being rebuilt. I realized then what my final role was. I couldn't stop the story, but I could change it. I started recording this, not as a warning, not as entertainment, but as a confession. I slowed my voice, stripped out drama, let the guilt sit unpolished and ugly. Because fear feeds the towns, but revulsion weakens them. If you're still listening now, if something in your chest feels tight, if curiosity has curdled into unease, then this is working. You're not imagining a place you want to see. You're imagining something you never want near you. That matters. I can feel Ashfield resisting. The pull isn't as strong when the story leaves a bad taste behind. But it's not gone. It never will be. I don't know how much longer I'll be allowed to speak like this. The bell is getting louder again, sharper, impatient. So listen carefully.
If you ever see a sign welcoming you to a town you don't remember driving towards, if fog rolls in too fast, if the people smile like they're relieved to see you, don't stay. Don't ask questions. Don't listen to the stories. Because once you do, the town remembers you, and somewhere beneath its streets, something learns your name.
That's what nobody tells you. When the ringing finally faded, when that constant pressure behind my ribs loosened for the first time in years, I expected relief, peace, maybe even sleep. Instead, I got silence so deep it felt artificial, like the world was holding still just to see what I would do next. I sat in my car for hours after the recording ended, hands resting uselessly on the steering wheel, staring at a road that didn't seem to lead anywhere anymore. No pull, no direction, no invisible thread tugging me toward fog. Ashfield was quiet. Not gone, quiet. That distinction matters. The days that followed felt unreal. I slept without dreaming, ate without tasting, walked through crowds without feeling watched. For the first time since I was 17, I was just another person passing through places that didn't care whether I stayed or left. It was unsettling. Freedom always is when you've lived too long inside a cage. I checked the forums. The stories were still there, but something had changed. The tone was different. Less fascination, more discomfort. Comment sections arguing instead of speculating. Videos losing momentum instead of gaining it. People weren't imagining the towns anymore. They were rejecting them. That's how starvation begins. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The first town to truly die was Briar Hollow. No fire, no explosion, no missing persons report. It just emptied. People moved away quietly, businesses closed, the sign at the edge of town fell over and no one bothered to fix it. When the power finally shut off, there was no one left to notice. I went there. I shouldn't have, but I needed to see it for myself. Briar Hollow felt wrong in a new way, not alive, not watching. Hollow. The building stood intact, but empty of meaning, like sets after a play has ended. The square had no platform, no statue, just bare concrete stained with something too old to identify. I felt nothing. No pole, no echo. The hunger had starved. That should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified me. Because hunger doesn't die quietly. It adapts. The bell rang that night. Once. Not inside me. Outside. I froze. The sound came from a place I recognized instantly. Not a town, not a square. A hospital. I followed it like an idiot, heart hammering, dread flooding back in familiar waves. The bell wasn't ringing through the air. It was ringing through people. I saw it then. Ashfield wasn't retreating. It was changing hosts. No more platforms, no more statues, no more small towns pretending to be sanctuaries. The hunger had learned something from me, from the story. It didn't need geography anymore. It needed systems. Places where suffering already wore a uniform. Hospitals, institutions, bureaucracies, places where suffering could be processed, justified, anonymized, where names became numbers, where bells were replaced by alarms. I felt it stir. Not strong, not focused, but diffuse, spread thin, harder to see, harder to fight. You can't end it, I whispered to the empty hallway. The silence didn't answer. That's when I understood my real punishment. I wasn't spared. I wasn't freed. I was repurposed. Not as bait, not as a storyteller, but as a witness. Someone who knows what hunger looks like when it puts on a cleaner face. Someone who remembers what towns used to be so I can recognize what they're becoming. Ashfield may be starving, but hunger never forgets how to eat. If you're listening to this now, don't panic. Panic feeds it too. Just remember this part. The most dangerous towns are the ones that insist they're necessary. The most dangerous sacrifices are the ones called routine. And the bell? It doesn't always ring. Sometimes it just hums. Low. Constant. Easy to ignore. Until you realize you've been living inside it the whole time.
I don't know where I am anymore. Places blur together now. Motel rooms, parked cars, empty apartments rented under names that aren't mine. The geography doesn't matter. Ashfield doesn't need proximity. It hasn't for a long time. What it needs is closure. And that's the one thing I've been refusing to give it. The bell hasn't stopped ringing for days. Not audibly, not always, but inside me. A constant pressure, like standing too close to a speaker humming with feedback. Every time someone listens to my story, I feel it. Every time someone finishes it, the bell falters just a little. That's how I know this matters. That's how I know you matter. Because stories like this are supposed to end one way, with the town winning, with the hunger satisfied, with the listener left uneasy but untouched, free to move on. Ashfield wants that ending. It's always wanted that ending. But this isn't just a story anymore. It's a negotiation. Last night, the voice came back. Not in my head, in the room. The air thickened, shadows deepened, and that familiar pressure settled over my shoulders like hands I couldn't shrug off. The lights flickered, not violently, not threateningly, patiently. "You have said enough," the voice told me. "The telling must end." I laughed. It came out broken, hoarse, but genuine. I said, "You're afraid." Silence. That was answer enough. I continued, "You fed on secrecy, on ritual, on fear passed quietly, but now you're being seen, dissected, picked apart." The room trembled. "You are damaging the balance." Good. The pressure intensified. My vision blurred at the edges, and for a moment I thought I might black out. I felt Ashfield reaching, not to consume, but to reclaim, to pull me back into its structure, to silence me the way it had silenced so many others. "You belong to us," it said. I shook my head slowly. "No," I whispered. I belong to the telling. That's when I understood the final truth. Ashfield doesn't just consume people, it consumes endings. It keeps stories open, unresolved, endlessly circulating, bells ringing, platforms repeated. As long as the story never truly ends, the hunger never has to face itself. So I'm ending it. Not with fire, not with escape, with refusal. Here's what Ashfield doesn't want you to know. The towns are not infinite. They are fragile. They rely on participation, active emotional investment, fear with fascination, dread with desire. But disgust is poison. Guilt, fully acknowledged, rots the structure from the inside. That's why they tried to forget me. That's why they turned survivors into storytellers. And that's why I'm telling you this part, slowly, deliberately. Ashfield is not ancient. It's not divine. It's a machine built from compromised people making small, selfish decisions and calling them necessary. It survives because people look away at the right moment. So don't. Don't romanticize it. Don't wonder what you'd do. Don't imagine the fog. See it for what it is. A town that eats because no one ever taught it how to die. The bell is quieter now. I can feel it weakening, stretching farther to be heard, ringing too often, losing meaning. Towns are failing, not collapsing dramatically, just fading, being forgotten properly this time. That's how they end, not in fire, in indifference. If this recording cuts off, if my voice stops abruptly, don't look for me, don't speculate, don't add mystery where there doesn't need to be one. That would only help it. Just remember this. If a place asks you to give a little so it can keep going, if it tells you sacrifice is the price of belonging, if it promises safety in exchange for silence, walk away. Let it starve. The bell just rang again, but this time it sounds distant, uncertain, like something calling out and realizing no one is listening anymore. That's the sound of it ending. And if you're hearing this, really hearing it,